Beneath the emerald canopy of the Mayan jungles, where shadows breathe and the night air trembles with unseen life, a story has always lingered, woven like fine thread into the fabric of time. It is a tale not only of gods and mortals, but of the moon itself, that silver lantern that rises over the ancient world, watching, weeping, and whispering. At its heart is Ixchel, the radiant and enigmatic goddess whose power flowed like the rivers of her land, whose beauty glowed like the waxing moon, and whose passions burned with the intensity of fire hidden beneath water. To speak her name is to summon 1,000 sensations: the cool kiss of moonlight on skin, the languid song of cicadas rising in the night, the fragrance of flowers that open only when the sun has gone. She was more than a goddess. She was the rhythm of cycles themselves, the weaver of threads that bound life and death, fertility and barrenness, desire and distance. The Mayan people looked to her not as a figure far above them, but as a presence that lived within their bodies and dreams, shaping their hungers, their fears, their hopes. The world of Ixchel was lush and alive. Great ceiba trees lifted their roots toward the heavens like bridges between realms, their trunks echoing with the whispers of ancestors. Rivers coiled through the earth like shimmering serpents, reflecting starlight upon their restless surfaces. And above it all, the skies stretched wide and eternal, jeweled with constellations that told stories of love, war, and loss. Within that vast tapestry, the moon reigned as both guardian and temptress, and it was in that luminous body that Ixchel's spirit dwelled. By day, the sun god Itzamna filled the world with relentless light, scorching fields and commanding worship. But by night, when his fire retreated, Ixchel descended softly, gently, spreading her glow over lovers lying in the grass, over mothers nursing their children, over healers preparing potions by the flicker of flame. She was the patroness of weavers, who whispered prayers as they traced her patterns in thread, hoping their hands might echo the divine motions of her loom. Each thread, each knot, each color was believed to be a fragment of her own eternal tapestry, a map of destiny. The moon was her mirror, waxing and waning with her moods. When she was full, her body glowed with fertility and desire. When she waned, shadows deepened, echoing her retreat into mystery. Her cycles were not just celestial, but sensual, felt in the pulse of human longing, in the tide of rivers, in the very breath of the earth. For the Maya, Ixchel was not a distant symbol. She was a presence that could be touched in the moist soil, in the tender heat of embrace, in the hush of midnight when dreams revealed forbidden truths. The poets of her temples spoke of her beauty in hushed tones. They said her hair was the dark cascade of the jungle night, threaded with stars. Her skin glowed like polished jade under the silver of her moon. Her eyes, deep and searching, carried both comfort and danger.
for to meet her gaze was to see one's own soul reflected back, stripped bare of lies. She walked in silence, yet her presence stirred the air like the fragrance of blooming orchids, heavy, intoxicating, and impossible to resist. Yet Ixchel was never merely gentle. The Maya knew her as a goddess of storms as well, a mistress of waters that could both nourish and destroy. Rain fell at her command, rivers overflowed when she wept, and tempests raged when her passions grew violent. To love her was to accept her duality, the tender caress and the sudden fury, the luminous blessing and the dark withdrawal. She was desire incarnate, but also the ache of absence, reminding mortals that beauty is as fleeting as it is eternal. It is said that every woman carried a fragment of Ixchel within her, in the laughter of maidens, in the sighs of lovers, in the groans of mothers giving life, the goddess revealed herself. She was the secret ache in the chest of a young man yearning for a woman he could not have. She was the cool relief of water after a day of toil. She was the whisper in dreams that urged mortals to reach beyond themselves, even if it meant courting danger. Ixchel was love, but she was also longing, the kind of longing that makes the heart tremble and the body surrender. To imagine her story is to walk between worlds. One must listen to the jungle at night, where owls cry warnings and jaguars prowl unseen, their golden eyes catching shards of moonlight. One must feel the heaviness of the air, thick with humidity, as though the very earth itself is sweating with desire. One must look up at the sky, where the moon drifts in silence, changing shape as though in response to some hidden yearning. It is here, in this realm between silence and song, between shadow and silver, that Ixchel's myth begins.
She was called the Lady Rainbow as well, for her beauty spanned the sky after storms, her colors arching as promises of renewal. But rainbows, like love, are brief, dazzling, then fading. Her myth is not a single tale, but many, a goddess of healing and midwifery, a patroness of artisans, a lover who defied gods, a weaver who held the fate of all things in her loom. Each story was a thread, and together they formed a vast and trembling fabric that pulsed with sensual energy. And yet, despite the many roles she played, there was always one essence at her core, the inexhaustible dance of desire and sorrow. To gaze upon the moon was to know her presence. To feel the tug of tides was to sense her pull. To watch the weaving of a skilled hand was to recognize her artistry. She was everywhere, and yet she was elusive, like a dream that fades with the rising sun, but leaves the body aching for what was glimpsed. The Maya knew that myths were not just stories. They were truths cloaked in symbols, whispers from the gods themselves. To speak of Ixchel was to speak of the moon within one's own chest, the hidden chamber of the heart where love and longing coil together. Her myth was not to be learned, but to be felt.
in the trembling of hands, in the quickening of breath, in the heat that rises when night embraces the earth. And so, as the moon ascends and spills her silver over the endless jungle, as rivers gleam like mirrors of the sky, and as the saber tree sways with secrets only gods can know, we find ourselves on the threshold of Ixchel's story, a story not of distant divinity, but of intimacy, of yearning, of beauty so tender it wounds. To enter her myth is to surrender to a world where every shadow is alive, every breath is a prayer, and every glimmer of light is her caress. Here begins the weaving of her tale, silken, luminous, and unending.
In every myth, the figures who step into the light of the story are not mere beings, but forces, embodiments of desire, wisdom, chaos, or creation. To understand the tale of Ixchel is to feel her world through the presence of those who surrounded her, those who loved and feared her, those who were drawn into the cycles of her moonlit embrace. At the center of this tapestry is, of course, Ixchel herself. She is the goddess who cannot be contained within a single shape or meaning. To some, she appeared as a maiden, luminous and soft, her body aglow with the pale silver of the waxing moon. To others, she revealed herself as a mother, fertile and nurturing, her hands healing the sick, her wounds swelling with the promise of life. And to others still, she was seen as the crone, veiled in shadows, her gaze heavy with sorrow, her touch as cool and final as the waning moon. In each form she was beautiful, in each form she was dangerous, and in each form she was utterly irresistible. Her femininity was not fragile, but an ocean, boundless, shifting, capable of tenderness and fury alike. The Mayans believed she carried jars of water in her hands, and from them poured the rains that nourished crops and quenched thirst. Yet if her passions were stirred to anger, those same waters became floods that destroyed villages and swallowed fields whole. She was healing incarnate, midwife of the universe, yet her very hands could also summon pain. Such duality was her essence, the soothing balm and the stinging wound, the lover's caress and the tempest's lash. But a goddess of such magnitude did not move through eternity alone. Beside her, and sometimes against her, stood Itzamna, the great god of creation, wisdom, and the blazing sun. If Ixchel was moonlight, Itzamna was fire. If she was fluidity, he was permanence. Their union was both inevitable and volatile. In some myths, he is her husband, her consort, the partner whose knowledge balances her mystery. In others, he is a jealous figure, fearful of the irresistible allure she held to even other gods and mortals. Their love was a storm, at times fertile and tender, at times destructive, as though the universe itself trembled beneath the weight of their passions.
Itzamna embodied the unyielding light of day, while Ixchel softened the world in the intimacy of night. When he burned too fiercely, she offered relief. When her shadows grew too deep, he brought clarity. Yet their union was never simple harmony. It was a cycle of attraction and withdrawal, of embraces and separations, mirroring the eternal dance of sun and moon across the sky. Beyond Itzamna, Ixchel was said to have taken lovers, or at least drawn them into the orbit of her beauty. For how could such a goddess, whose very breath stirred desire, remain untouched by those who yearned for her? She was temptation incarnate, the shimmer of the moon upon water, the elusive figure glimpsed between dreams. Whether mortal or divine, those who sought her found themselves consumed, uplifted, or destroyed, for intimacy with her was never without consequence. Around her too gathered the symbols and companions that spoke of her nature. The moon itself was her mirror, waxing with her joy, waning with her sorrow. In every phase the Maya saw her moods reflected, the passionate fullness, the fragile crescent, the vanishing darkness before renewal. To watch the moon was to watch Ixchel live her own eternal story. The tides answered her call, rising like breath when she leaned close, retreating when she turned away. In their endless motion, mortals felt her longing and her distance, her nearness and her absence. Fishermen prayed to her for bounty. Lovers whispered beneath her glow. Healers invoked her name when the waters of the womb prepared to break. Animals, too, were bound to her myth. The jaguar, with its sleek body and golden eyes, was her nocturnal counterpart, fierce and sensual, moving like shadow through the jungle. The serpent, coiling and uncoiling, represented her power of transformation, her ability to shed one skin and reveal another, just as the moon itself changes form. And the rabbit, a humble yet potent symbol, was said to be imprinted upon the surface of the moon, a reminder of her tenderness and fertility, a creature whose softness belied the infinite strength of life's cycles. Each of these beings was more than ornament to her myth. They were fragments of her essence made flesh. To speak of Ixchel was to summon jaguar eyes in the dark, serpent scales glinting in silver light, the silent twitch of a rabbit's ear as it senses the mysteries of night. They were her companions, her reflections, her embodiments in the world of mortals.
Yet above all others, it was Ixchel herself who commanded the heart. The Maya did not see her as a goddess far removed from their daily struggles. Instead, she was intimate, immediate, woven into the blood of childbirth, the ache of desire, the release of tears, the ecstasy of union. Women carried her in their wombs and in their weaving. Men carried her in their longings and in the sweat of their labors. Children felt her in the soft glow that calmed their fears at night. She was everywhere, in sky, in water, in flesh. And Itzamna, though mighty, was only ever a counterpart to her endless unfolding. His wisdom and power were vast, yet even he could not fully contain the allure of Ixchel. Their union was a symbol of balance, yes, but also of conflict. For what is desire without tension? What is love without the shadow of jealousy? What is creation
without the threat of destruction. Together they embodied the fragile balance of the cosmos itself. The presentation of these figures is not a parade of names, but a revelation of forces. Ixchel is tenderness and fury, beauty and terror. Itzamna is light and permanence, wisdom and control. The moon is her body, the tides her breath, the jaguar her hunger, the serpent her transformation, the rabbit her innocence that hides even within passion. These characters are irresistible because they are us and we are them. Their myth is the mirror of our own secret selves, shimmering beneath the surface, waiting for the touch of moonlight to reveal them.
Desire is never still. It trembles beneath the surface like a hidden river, pressing against its banks until the flood comes. For Ixchel, goddess of moonlight and weaving, desire was both her blessing and her curse. She was a goddess, bound by the weight of creation, expected to nurture, to heal, to bless. Yet within her glowed a flame that could not be contained by duty alone, a yearning for passion, freedom, and love that often clashed with the chains of divinity. Her consort, Itzamna, knew this well. He was the god of wisdom, the steady fire of the sun, whose brilliance filled the day with order and clarity. To him, Ixchel was more than a partner. She was a jewel of the cosmos, radiant and dangerous, both his equal and his threat. Their love was fierce, born of attraction between opposites, the fire of the day and the glow of the night, wisdom and mystery, permanence and change. But passion, when it burns too brightly, can scorch as easily as it warms. Ixchel was drawn to Itzamna's wisdom, yes, but his relentless demand for control often weighed heavily upon her. He wanted her beauty to shine for him alone, her moonlight to bathe only his path. Yet she was the moon. She belonged to the rivers, to the tides, to the lovers who whispered beneath her glow, to the women who labored in childbirth and called upon her name. Her nature was to be shared, to be present in the secret hungers of all who looked up at the night sky. And so tension grew between them. Jealousy seeped into their union like a slow poison. Itzamna's eyes, once filled with admiration, now flickered with suspicion. He saw how mortals prayed to her, how men and women alike longed for her touch, how her beauty seemed to belong to no one, not even him. The sun could command the day with authority, but the moon, gentle and elusive, always slipped from his grasp. The stories whispered among the Maya tell of moments when Itzamna's jealousy erupted. His words were sharp, his temper fierce, and storms were born from their quarrels. It was said that when thunder rolled through the heavens, it was the echo of his rage, and when lightning split the sky, it was Ixchel's defiance flashing against his control. Their love was not calm, but tempestuous, filled with embraces that soothed and betrayals that wounded, a cycle as eternal as the waxing and waning of her moon.
But Ixchel was not content to be downed in a cage of expectation. Her heart, like the moon itself, was restless. She longed for freedom, for the taste of passion unshackled by jealousy, for love that was not shadowed by possession. Some myths speak of her lovers beyond Itzamna, mortal men who were blessed or cursed by her touch, gods who could not resist her glow. These were not mere affairs. They were declarations of her independence, her refusal to be confined. She was a goddess of cycles, of renewal, of endless change, and love, for her, could never be still. Desire pulsed through her like blood. It was in the way moonlight brushed over water, shimmering as if trembling with hidden ecstasy. It was in the soft curve of her lips when she smiled, in the sighs of night winds that carried her whispers through the jungle. When Ixchel touched the earth, flowers opened as if blushing beneath her caress. When she leaned close to mortals in dreams, they awoke trembling, their bodies aching with a hunger they could not name. Itzamna felt this power, and it terrified him. For what is wisdom? What is control when faced with desire that slips like water through clenched fingers? He loved her fiercely, but his love turned possessive, shadowed by the fear that she would abandon him, that her heart would wander as the moon wanders across the sky. His jealousy became a storm, pressing against her freedom, testing the fragile bond between them. And yet Ixchel too was torn, for though she longed for freedom, she also loved him. Their union had birthed creation. Their embrace had kindled balance between night and day. She was drawn to his fire even as it scorched her, bound to his wisdom even as it sought to cage her. Desire for him was as undeniable as the pull of tides to the moon, irresistible and inescapable. And so she lived in conflict, torn between love and freedom, between passion and independence, between belonging and escape. The Maya believed that this struggle was written in the heavens themselves. When the moon was full, they said, Ixchel had surrendered wholly to her passion, her body glowing with love and abundance. But when the moon waned, it was her sorrow, her retreat, her withdrawal from Itzamna's jealous grip. And when the moon disappeared entirely, when darkness swallowed the sky, it was her hiding, her escape, her refusal to be seen at all. The sky became the stage upon which their eternal conflict played out, night after night, cycle after cycle.
But beneath this celestial drama was a deeper truth. The human heart beats with the same conflict. We long for love, yet we fear its chains. We crave freedom, yet we ache for belonging. Ixchel was not only a goddess, she was the embodiment of this paradox. The restless fire that burns within every lover, every seeker, every soul that has ever trembled at the touch of desire. Her story was not only divine, but profoundly human. Every whispered secret, every jealous glance, every trembling embrace found its reflection in her myth. The Maya who told her stories felt her conflict within their own bodies, in the yearning that kept them awake at night, in the tears shed over lovers lost, in the ecstasy that made them forget the boundaries of self. Ixchel's desire was the desire of the world itself. The rivers longed to meet the sea. The flowers longed for the kiss of rain. The earth longed for the touch of sun. And yet, just as in her myth, these unions were always fragile.
always shadowed by the threat of separation, by the inevitability of loss. Passion was never without pain, creation never without destruction, love never without jealousy. This was the essence of her story, conflict and desire intertwined, inseparable. For Ixchel, to love was to burn, to yearn, to risk betrayal, to embrace both ecstasy and sorrow. She could not exist without longing, and longing itself could not exist without her. And so the myth of Ixchel moves forward, not with calm or harmony, but with tension. The goddess of the moon, radiant and mysterious, wrestles with her love for Itzamna and her hunger for freedom. Jealousy sparks, passion consumes, storms break, and still the cycle continues, waxing and waning, hiding and revealing, caressing and burning. It is this conflict, this eternal dance of passion and restraint, of freedom and possession that keeps her story alive. For in Ixchel's restless heart we see our own, always yearning, always torn, always craving resolution that never truly comes. The night was swollen with heat, as though the jungle itself held its breath. Leaves glistened with dew, animals hushed their songs, and the river flowed heavy and dark, its surface trembling with the reflection of the moon. Ixchel stood at the heart of it all, her body gleaming in silver light, her breath rising like mist against the velvet dark. Desire had wound her in its threads, pulling her tighter and tighter until she could no longer contain the fire burning in her chest. It was then that Itzamna came to her, his presence blazing like the sun that he commanded. His hands carried the weight of fire, his gaze burned with love that had soured into jealousy, and yet his body trembled with the same hunger that consumed her. They were gods, yes, but in that moment they were simply two beings caught in the inexorable tide of longing, helpless before the gravity of passion. He reached for her, and she did not turn away. Their union was inevitable, like the meeting of river and sea, like lightning striking the earth. His lips pressed to hers, fierce and demanding, while her body arched beneath his touch, surrendering and resisting all at once. The air shuddered with their embrace, and the heavens themselves seemed to tremble as storm clouds gathered overhead. Moonlight poured over them in waves, flooding the earth with silver. Shadows danced wildly, tangled with flashes of fire as lightning split the sky. The world held nothing but them, their breath, their bodies, their cries rising into the night. Ixchel, goddess of the moon, wove herself into Itzamna's flame, and the loom of the cosmos quivered as their threads entwined. But passion is never gentle when shadowed by jealousy. His embrace was both worship and claim, as though he sought to bind her to him, to possess her utterly. She, radiant and unyielding, responded with equal fire, giving herself to the union, yet trembling with the knowledge that she could never truly belong to anyone. Their love was not calm, but violent,
not tender, but consuming, a storm given flesh. The heavens erupted. Rain fell in torrents, as though the jars Ixchel carried in her myth had shattered in her ecstasy. Rivers swelled, thunder roared, and jaguars cried from the jungle depths, their voices echoing the primal power of the moment. Mortals looked up at the sky in awe and fear, for they knew the gods were quarreling, the gods were loving, the gods were tearing at the very fabric of the world in their passion.
In their climax, Ixchel's body glowed as though the full moon itself lived in her veins. Her cries were the cries of creation, the sigh of rivers meeting the sea, the gasp of flowers blooming in midnight hours, the moan of earth quaking beneath sudden rain. She gave herself fully, surrendering to desire, opening the loom of her soul so that Itzamna's fire could weave itself into her threads. For a heartbeat of eternity, they were not separate beings but one, sun and moon, fire and water, wisdom and mystery, bound in the ecstasy of union. And yet, even in surrender, there was fracture. For desire does not erase conflict, it only sharpens it. Beneath his passion, she felt the claws of his jealousy, the chains of his need to possess. Beneath her surrender lay the ache of her longing for freedom, the certainty that even in their embrace she was still slipping away, still belonging to no one but herself. Their climax was not resolution, but explosion, not harmony, but rupture. The threads of fate trembled and snapped. Where once her loom wove smoothly, now it tangled. Strands pulled too tight, others broke under strain, until the tapestry of their love was marred by knots of fury and sorrow. In that moment of purest passion, the seeds of heartbreak were sown. The storm raged on. Lightning lit their faces, showing the raw vulnerability in their eyes. Itzamna's fire burned with need, with fear, with the desperation of a god who could not hold the goddess he adored. Ixchel's glow was softer, sorrowful, her beauty breaking into something fragile, the look of one who loves but cannot surrender her soul. Their climax was both consummation and tearing apart. They had come together with a force that shook the heavens, yet already they were falling away, pulled back into their eternal cycle of embrace and separation. The rain slowed, the thunder faded, the storm loosened its grip, but the silence that followed was heavier than the tempest had been. Ixchel lay beneath the moonlight, her body shimmering with exhaustion and longing. Her hair spread across the earth like a river of night, her skin wet with rain and desire. She looked to the sky, to the moon that mirrored her own restless heart, and felt the ache of sorrow mingling with the fading glow of passion.
Itzamna stood above her, his fire dimmed, his gaze filled with both tenderness and fury. He loved her beyond reason, beyond wisdom, yet he could not release his grip, could not love her without seeking to bind her. He touched her cheek with trembling fingers, but the gesture was as much claim as caress. "Mine," his voice thundered, though soft as the dying storm. You are mine. But the moon, radiant and eternal, cannot be owned. Ixchel closed her eyes, and a single tear slipped down her cheek, shimmering like silver as it fell to the earth. The tear became a pool, and from it the jungle drank deeply, flowers blossoming in its wake. Even in sorrow she created. Even in captivity she gave life. Her heart, however, could not be contained. Even as she lay in his arms, even as his fire warmed her, she felt the pull of freedom, the call of the tides, the endless longing of the moon to wander. Their climax had bound them, yes, but it had also reminded her of the truth. She could give herself, but never surrender entirely. And so the world learned that passion, at its peak, is both ecstasy and wound. It is surrender that reveals our deepest strength, vulnerability that unveils our power. Ixchel, in her climax, had embodied the paradox of love, that to give fully is to risk breaking, that to burn brightly is to risk being consumed, that to weave desire into fate is to watch threads snap under the strain. The mortals below felt it too. Lovers clung tighter that night, their bodies trembling with an ache they could not name. Women in childbirth cried out, feeling the goddess's pain within their own. Healers prepared herbs and whispered prayers, sensing that the very air was charged with her sorrow. The climax of the goddess was the climax of the world itself, creation and destruction, passion and grief, interwoven in a single trembling breath. And so the peak passed, the moon sank lower, her glow fading, her light veiled by clouds. Ixchel withdrew, not in anger, but in inevitability. She could not remain in his arms forever. She could not silence the pull of her own restless soul. The storm had ended, but its echoes lingered in every trembling leaf, in every ripple of the river, in every longing sigh of mortal hearts that night. For the climax of Ixchel was not resolution, it was revelation. That love, at its fiercest, is both wound and balm. That passion, at its brightest, is both union and fracture. That the moon, however close it seems, will always remain just out of reach.
The storm had spent itself. The clouds, swollen with rage and ecstasy, drifted apart, unveiling a sky washed clean by tears of rain. Stars emerged timidly, their pale fires quivering against the black velvet of night, as though even they feared to shine too brightly in the aftermath of the goddess's passion. The jungle stirred again, cautious at first. Frogs resumed their song, owls called softly from the branches, and rivers, though swollen and wild, carried their burden with new rhythm. At the heart of it all lay Ixchel, her silver light still clinging to every wet leaf, every trembling petal. She rose slowly, her body glistening with rain and sweat, her hair tangled like dark rivers over her shoulders. Though her eyes shimmered with sorrow, her presence was luminous, a reflection of the moon itself, distant, mysterious, yet impossibly tender.
Itzamna watched her, his fire dimmed to embers. In their union he had given himself fully, and yet it had not bound her as he wished. His hand reached for her again, but this time she stepped back, the soft movement firm with resolve. Her voice, when it came, was not thunder, not storm, but something quieter, aching with truth. You are the sun, Itzamna, creator, wisdom, flame, but I am the moon. I cannot burn as you burn. I wax, I wane, I rise, I fall. My path is not one of possession, but of cycles. I must be free to return, to depart, to weave the patterns that keep the world alive. He bowed his head, sorrow etched across his face, but he did not press further. He knew then that even gods cannot chain the moon. And so Ixchel withdrew. Slowly she lifted her gaze to the heavens, and her body became one with the light of the moon. She ascended, her form dissolving into radiance until only the silver glow remained, casting its tender light across the drenched earth. She was gone from his arms, but not from the world, for in retreating, she had not abandoned creation. She had only woven herself into it more deeply.
From that night forward, her presence was known in cycles. She would wax with fullness, luminous and whole, pouring her blessings of fertility and abundance upon the earth. Then she would wane, drawing back into shadow, her sorrow mirrored in her fading glow, teaching mortals the inevitability of loss and longing. In her disappearance, the world learned patience. In her return, it learned renewal. Her tears, fallen in that final embrace, became rivers that fed the earth, swelling with fertility, nourishing crops and jungles alike. Her sighs became the winds that carried seeds across the land, ensuring life would always find new ground. And her body, now a reflection in the heavens, pulled at the waters of the earth, raising tides that rose and fell like the ache of desire. For mortals, she became the rhythm of their lives. Women in childbirth prayed to her glow, whispering her name as their bodies echoed her cycles of creation and pain. Lovers lay together beneath her light, believing her passion stirred their own. Healers traced her phases in their rituals, aligning herbs and prayers with her waxing and waning, knowing she carried the mysteries of both life and death. Yet Ixchel was not only a comfort. Her absence, her distance, her sorrow, these too became part of her gift. For she taught the world that love is not possession, but transformation. That desire is not endless flame, but ebb and flow. That even in separation, intimacy leaves its mark. Each time she disappeared into shadow, mortals felt the ache of longing. Each time she returned, they rejoiced in renewal. And what of Itzamna? His fire still burned, but it softened, tempered by loss. No longer did he try to bind her, for he understood that the sun cannot hold the moon. Instead, he turned his fire to creation, to the weaving of the earth, to wisdom shared with humankind, to guiding mortals in their journey beneath the sky.
yet his gaze often lifted to the heavens, to the silver glow that slipped between shadows. And when she was full, radiant and untouchable, he whispered her name into the void, a prayer, a memory, a love that endured despite distance. Their story lived on in every cycle of the heavens. When the moon hid her face, mortals said she was retreating from her lover, cloaked in sorrow. When she bloomed full and round, they whispered she had returned, luminous with passion, reunited for a fleeting moment with the fire she could never fully possess. Thus, the very sky became their eternal dance. Longing, union, separation, renewal.
The world bore their imprint. Fertility pulsed in fields nourished by her tears. Children born under her light were said to carry her tenderness in their hearts, and women who bled with the moon carried her cycles within their own bodies. The tides rose and fell, mirroring her ebb and flow, carrying the rhythm of her longing across the shores. Weaving, her sacred art became the image of her soul. Threads tightening, loosening, breaking and rejoining in endless patterns that mirrored her own story with Itzamna. And so, even in retreat, Ixchel remained intimate with the world. She was not gone, not silent, but forever present in ways unseen, in water, in threads, in flesh, in light. Her outcome was not disappearance, but transformation, a shift from flesh to cycle, from presence to rhythm, from goddess in arms to goddess in the sky. For mortals, her myth became both warning and blessing. Lovers learned that passion could consume, but also create. Mothers understood that pain and joy were twined, inseparable like threads on her loom. Healers traced her phases in their rituals, finding in her cycles a map of balance, of life forever renewing itself. Ixchel's retreat to the moon was not escape, but gift. By withdrawing, she made herself eternal. By leaving Itzamna's embrace, she gave herself to all creation. She became distance so that all might feel her pull, became absence so that all might crave her return, became light so that all might be touched by her glow. And so, each night when her silver face rises above the jungle canopy, mortals lift their eyes in wonder. They see not only a goddess, but a story of passion and rupture, of creation and sorrow, of cycles that weave themselves into every life. They feel her in their bodies, their desires, their wounds, their hopes. They know she is both close and distant, lover and mystery, healer and destroyer, forever unreachable, yet forever with them. The outcome of her climax was not silence, but song, a song written in rivers and tides, in wombs and hearts, in threads and stars, a song that whispers still that love is not possession, that longing is eternal, and that the moon, in her silver sorrow, belongs to no one and to everyone.
And now, as the tale of Ixchel lingers like the last silver trace of moonlight before dawn, we are left to ask, What does it mean that a goddess of such passion, such tenderness, such sorrow, still moves through us? What does it mean that her myth endures, woven into the threads of our lives as surely as it is woven into the heavens? Her story is not distant, not a relic carved in stone or written in faded glyphs. No, it is alive here in the pulse of our own bodies. Just as she waxes and wanes, we too rise and fall. We love, we desire, we ache, we lose, we return. Every heartbeat is a cycle. Every breath is a tide. We are her loom, her weaving, her eternal rhythm. Consider the way desire burns in us, a touch, a glance, the hunger to be known fully. Is it not the echo of Ixchel's longing, her passion that shook the heavens and drew even the god of creation into her embrace? When we surrender to love, trembling and vulnerable, do we not mirror her surrender beneath the storm, her body given not only to its Amna, but to the eternal truth that love transforms us? And yet, like her, we cannot stay forever in union. The flame consumes, the tide recedes, the moon withdraws. Separation follows passion as surely as night follows day. This too is her gift, for without loss, renewal would hold no meaning. Without sorrow, joy would not blaze so brightly. Without absence, reunion could not taste so sweet. Ixchel reminds us that to live is not to cling, but to move, to cycle, to embrace the ebb as deeply as the flow. Look up at the moon on a night when it hides its face. The sky feels emptier, does it not? A hollow opens in the chest, subtle yet undeniable. We feel the ache of her distance. But then, night after night, her light grows again, a sliver, a curve, a glowing fullness that washes the world in silver, and with it our hearts swell, renewal, return, promise. She teaches us that nothing is ever truly lost, only transformed, only hidden for a time, waiting to be revealed again.
Perhaps this is why lovers so often turn their faces to the moon. Perhaps this is why poets compare kisses to silver light, and why we measure passion by tides. We instinctively feel her presence, in the warmth of bodies pressed together beneath her glow, in the salt taste of tears that fall after parting, in the soft strength of hands weaving thread or cradling new life. She is there. And she is there in the silence, too, in the emptiness after desire, in the nights when longing aches but cannot be answered, in the places where absence cuts sharp. For Ixchel does not belong only to passion's blaze, but also to the shadows that cradle it. To know her is to know that love is fragile, infinite, and divine all at once. She is a mirror. In her cycles we see ourselves. In her sorrow we see our own wounds. In her glow we see the beauty we crave and the tenderness we fear to lose. She is the goddess of weaving, not only because she threads rivers and stars, but because she threads our lives with meaning. Each strand desire, each knot loss,
each pattern renewal. And so the myth does not end. It cannot end. Each night the moon rises, it begins again. Each time a child draws its first breath, each time lovers press trembling lips together, each time tears fall into waiting soil, her story continues. Ixchel is not a goddess to be confined to the past. She is the goddess of now, of always, of the cycles that beat within us even as we speak her name. Think of your own life, your own cycles, the loves you have held and lost, the nights of passion that felt like eternity only to fade into memory, the mornings when sorrow weighed heavy on your chest, and the evenings when laughter returned like light breaking through. Were these not all echoes of her? Were these not the weaving of Ixchel's own hands? And if so, does it not mean that you too are divine in your longing, that your fragility is sacred, your desire holy, your sorrow a prayer? If Ixchel lives in the moon, in the tides, in the womb, then surely she lives in you as well. Her myth is not something to be admired from afar, but something to be felt in the marrow of your bones.
This is why the Maya whispered to her, why women prayed beneath her glow, why healers traced her phases, why lovers invoked her name in breathless moments of surrender. They understood what we must remember, that we are not separate from her. We are woven into her tapestry, our lives threads in her endless loom. And perhaps when our stories are told of love found and lost, of longing and renewal, perhaps they too will shine in silver, threads gleaming faintly against the vast dark. Perhaps they too will be lifted into the eternal weaving of the sky. So linger, listener. Do not hurry from her story. Let her light settle on your skin. Let her sorrow breathe into your chest. Let her cycles remind you that nothing is final, not even loss, not even death. Everything moves, everything changes, everything returns. Ixchel does not belong only to the Maya, nor only to the ancients. She belongs to anyone who has loved, anyone who has lost, anyone who has looked at the moon and felt a quiet ache. She belongs to you. And when tonight you raise your eyes and see her face, whether crescent thin or full and glowing, remember that you are seeing not just a celestial body, but a goddess who still weaves the threads of your life. Remember that her light is your light, her longing your longing, her renewal your renewal. In this way the myth is eternal. It does not close with these words. It opens again in you. It opens in your breath, your touch, your sorrow, your joy. It opens in every tide, every birth, every kiss, every tear. It opens in the endless weaving of cycles that bind you to the divine. And as you close your eyes tonight, silver lingering behind your lids, may you feel her touch, gentle, tender, eternal.
May you carry her into your dreams, into your desires, into your losses and your returns. For Ixchel is not gone. She is the thread itself, and you are part of her tapestry, forever woven into her endless, luminous song.